Welcome to Capital Conversations for Tuesday, March 20th. I'm Marty Owings.
And I'm Andy Friedel. Tonight on the program, we will be speaking with Senator Ted Daly, a Republican from Eagan, and former candidate for the Independence Party candidate for governor, Rob Hahn. Later on in the show, we'll have a couple of musical guests joining us, Rachel Colias and Dan Fontana. And right now, after this, we're going to be joined by Paul Demko from Politics in Minnesota, who's going to talk to us about what's going on up here in the Capitol this week.
As always, we invite you to participate in our political online talk show by tweeting us at MN Capital Conversations or leaving us a note on our Facebook page, and we'll ask your questions and conversate. Is that a word? Conversate about whatever.
No, but I think you use it a lot.
Well,
so you're going to make it one.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, joining us right now is Paul Demko from Politics in Minnesota. The reason we're down here in this room tonight, it might look a little different, is because the House is having a special evening session talking about the voter ID bill. So, Paul, you want to?
Yeah, I think it'll be a long night. It's a contentious issue, and I think there'll be a lot of floor speeches and a long debate. Even though we all know what the outcome of that vote will be when they eventually get to it tonight.
Meaning they will vote for.
Yeah, it will pass,
yes,
undoubtedly.
Okay.
But that won't deter everyone from making long speeches about it beforehand.
Well, let me ask you about why, poll data, Paul Demko, show that there's a majority of Minnesotans who, depending on what polls you look at, support the idea of voter ID. Is it that they don't realize it's a right that you have? They think it's privilege that you should be able to vote. So, where do you think the electorate's at on this?
Well, the polling data, you're right, overwhelmingly shows that it's a very popular issue. So I think the Republicans feel like it's a good issue for them. I think there's some downside to it, and that is that we know it's going to end up in the courts, and it'll be there for quite a long time. Similar laws have been struck down in Wisconsin. The federal government has intervened in Texas and South Carolina to keep photo ID laws from being implemented. So it's popular, but it's going to lead to a contentious process in the courts, undoubtedly.
Do you see anything else coming out of tonight's House session besides voter ID?
I don't think so. I think that's the agenda item for the day. So
what are the risks for the Republicans for taking the? What is the risk for the Republicans to take it to put yet another item on the ballot for voters in the fall?
Yeah, I think you've kind of summarized the risk. I mean, there's been a lot of talking points on the DFL side of, enough of this legislating by constitutional amendment. You should be doing your work, through the normal standard legislative process. So I think it does keep that alive as a talking point for the Democrats to say, look, the Republicans can't get their work done. They got to do everything through amendments and take everything to the voters, and that's not the way we should be doing things. So I think that's the risk for what otherwise, looks like a very popular issue for Republicans.
So let's talk about another issue, a constitutional amendment issue that's controversial and hasn't seemed to get anywhere with House leadership, which is the right to work legislation.
Yes, I think there's been
or Senate leadership too, I should say.
Yeah, I think it's an issue that's been tough within the Republican caucuses. There's some people like Representative Steve Jaskowski and Senator Dave Thompson that this is a top priority for them. They think this is very important, and they want it on the agenda. And there are other people in the caucus, some House members who have received labor backing in the past, like a Representative Tony Cornish or Representative Jim Abler, others who just don't want to bring the fight that right to work would bring. I mean, we've seen Ohio, we've seen Wisconsin, we've seen in Indiana, where when you've gone after organized labor, at least that's what they perceive, you're going to bring, a multi-million-dollar campaign by the AFL-CIO and labor unions to try to keep this from passing. And I think there's some Republicans, even if they support right to work, that are wary of inviting that fight.
But Paul, doesn't it beg the question, okay, like, so the Republican folks that we've had on the program have said that, look, this is a business issue. If we want to put people back to work in the state and it's about jobs, business wants us to make the playing field fair. And so if that's the case, and now there's unlimited money in the sort of, in these mini super PACs, if you look at it statewide, don't they have deeper pockets than the unions?
I don't know. I think conservative advocacy groups and conservatives would say no. That typically the unions and the left side of the aisle have had more money on independent expenditures. I think that was true in the governor's race in 2010. So business has more money. Do they want to spend it on politics and the controversies that will ensue when they do? Maybe not. I mean, that was a big issue in 2010 with Target and the governor's race. So.
Well, some would say maybe, like that, we had Mike Dean on not too long from Common Cause. Maybe that was only an issue because people knew it was Target. If the money donations to the causes are undisclosed, as they are in the national, super PAC level, no worries because nobody knows who donated, right?
Sure, that might indeed be the case.
Would that play a role? Maybe not.
Well,
Minnesota laws are a little different, but.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think corporations are understandably leary. I mean, what's the upside for them?
Well,
alienating 50% of the marketplace. That's the risk. So I think despite the kind of opening up the floodgates to that money, it's not necessarily going to pour in. So we'll see.
So your analysis would be it's not going.
I don't think so. I mean, Senator Thompson held a press conference this morning, again, to talk about it and to say he wants to see this push forward. It's sitting in the Rules Committee. Not clear if it's gonna get a hearing there, I don't think, and we haven't seen any movement in the House. So, I mean, who knows? But it doesn't look like it's got a lot of momentum at this point.
Well, before we run out of too much time, I want to touch on a story that ran this week. The Center for Public Integrity released a big report this week. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring it up because my co-host won't. She did much of the research and the investigation on this story herself.
Is that ethical?
Well, I think so. It's our program. I don't know. We can check with the committee later. But I think one of the things that struck me about the report was, first of all, the D+ that Minnesota got for its rating in terms of its report card. New Jersey had the top score with a B+, but New Jersey of all places, can you believe Jersey beat Minnesota? Anyway, to touch on that a little bit, Andi, maybe I could start with you. So, what was it about Minnesota, and then have you react, Paul? What were the key things about Minnesota that gave it the D+ rating for integrity?
Well, I think the big point about it is this is corruption risk. It's not which state is the most corrupt, and one of
because that would have been Illinois or Wisconsin, right?
Well,
not Minnesota.
No,
it's got to be the
as I was doing all my research, I was like, these states have a plethora of, corruption scandals that people could just talk about and write about, and
you don't really hear about that very
no,
often.
we had PhoneGate back in the '90s. I don't know if you remember
Democrats,
that. The
remember
Democrats,
they were
yeah.
using phone cards, weren't they?
Yep, and the Republicans right now have some issues. They were $2 million in debt with their campaign committee. So one of the things that we looked at is like what laws are in place, because other states have had all these corruption scandals. They've put laws in place to sort of keep up with how
the loopholes.
Exactly, everything's going on today, and Minnesota hasn't done that. So that's really why it got the D+.
I mean, it's in essence, inevitably, if you don't put these protections in, we will go down that road.
You're going to see it happen.
Yeah.
And that was Larry Jacobs from the University of Minnesota basically said that. He said he had a great quote like, "This is the impending Death Star of, I don't know, campaign finance." With the Supreme Court ruling and all the money that's coming into campaigns, that was a big area. Also the judiciary was another big area that basically got scored an F on.
I mean, it's interesting. There was going to be a fairly significant push for retention elections in the judicial system, I think, again, this legislative session, which basically takes out the competitive head-to-head races, and you do kind of, you say, should this judge keep his post or not? And, you know, the advocates of that, and it's been fairly bipartisan, have said, you know, this will kind of protect us from the big moneyed interests that we've seen in other states, Wisconsin being a really glaring example. But that has not, you know, Senator Limmer, who chairs the judiciary, is not a fan of it at all. He doesn't like it. He thinks it kind of usurps the democratic process, and we haven't seen it get any momentum at all, even though I think Representative Beard in the House is a co-sponsor.
Right.
And
Yeah, who's another Republican colleague.
yeah, and I think it had I want to say Senator Han was a sponsor in the Senate.
Right.
So.
Well, let me ask you about, I mean, like, the first time I think I was up here, I was surprised when a legislator pulled out the get out of jail free card. You know, which is, what do you mean? It's got to be a joke, right? This is and he said, no, if I get pulled over on the way here, I can show this card and I'm off the hook. Right? Well, what's that all about? Do you know about this?
I mean, I saw something about that the other day, actually, and was kind of surprised by it because I did not actually realize that was the case.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, and there might be some misunderstanding about how the card is used, but I think there's a group in a hearing tonight testifying to say that legislators should be under the same laws that the citizens are.
Right, yeah,
That,
Representative Creasel has a bill, I think.
If you get stopped drunk driving, you know, free pass, buddy. You got to.
Yeah.
Right, so it's.
Well,
you might be skeptical.
Say, in my research, that would not be true. There are no exceptions. The only thing, legislators can't be taken off the floor, and that to be arrested because
this card exists. It exists, and I will have a legislator on shortly. We'll ask him about it.
Yeah.
We'll ask to see his card. I think he's got one, but and maybe he'll show it to us. But anyway, I wanted to touch on that just briefly. But anyway, so as far as for what people should look out for this week, what's going on this week, and what do you think's coming up? What should people out there care about?
Well, voter ID, I think, is the big story of the week. I mean, that's.
But you think that's a lock? It's going through.
Yeah, it's
moving
We're going to see it in the
forward.
Senate by the end of the week, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. I think business property tax relief is a big thing. You know, Republicans have been pushing that, basically a phase out of the business property tax, which has been talked about for a long time, but hasn't happened. Of course, it costs money. That's a problem. The House wants to pay for it by offsetting it with cuts in the renters.
Right.
Give back, or I'm blanking on the term.
The refund.
Refund. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the Senate is still working out how they want to pay for it. So that will be an interesting issue. And anytime you're talking about property taxes, it becomes politically charged. So
does the Broad Corp Inquisition start this week, or what are we going to see from that?
I don't know. I mean, those fireworks came last week. I think you're probably going to settle into a bit of a lull and maybe a bit of a game of chicken. You know,
who's going to blink first?
Right. Will the Senate agree to go into mediation and talk about some kind of settlement for him, or will he proceed down the road of litigation and his promised threat of deposing legislators and asking them questions about their personal lives and potential personal misconduct? So
naming names.
Yeah. So
there'll be fines and suspensions if that happens.
I suspect it will be a while before we'll have any clarity on that, though.
Well, listen, Paul Demko, always a pleasure to have you drop by the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining
Appreciate
us.
it.
Paul Demko writes at Politics in Minnesota, and you can find that by Googling Politics in Minnesota or politicsinminnesota.com, also known as PIM.
Up next, we are going to speak to Senator Ted Daly from Eagan and Rob Hahn. Stay with us.